Good evening. Hi, I'm Patrick Rooney. I'm the Executive Director of the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University. It's my pleasure to kick this off tonight. And thank you for coming to joining us for the 8th annual Thomas H. Lake Lecture. I think this is going to be a very special event on several fronts. The Lake Institute is a key part of the Center's mission in understanding philanthropy and improving its practice in all of its wonderful forms. We do this generally through research, education, and training programs, and through a number of our unique programs, including the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving. We believe that the Lake Institute is the only institute nationally, and perhaps internationally, that studies, trains, and teaches about the integral relationships between faith and philanthropy. Tonight, we're also joined by Dr. Richard Gunderman, who's on our faculty in philanthropic studies and has this other day job at the School of Medicine as well. And I have to say, I'm personally biased because I get annoyed because Richard reads more in the humanities and the liberal arts than I do, and that's where my faculty appointment is. And he also has written the definitive textbook in radiology. Dr. Gunderman is an expert on ethics and the values of philanthropy, and as my wife would say, he's a real doctor. And I think you know the other part of that story. I think Dr. Gunderman is extraordinarily well-read and probably leads the pack of the faculty in philanthropic studies, and probably indeed the entirety of IUPUI in his breadth of reading and his depth of his research. I will guarantee you that you'll leave tonight thinking in new ways about what it means to give and how to give. Now it's my privilege to introduce Chancellor Charles Bance, who is the Chancellor of IUPUI and the Executive Vice President of Indiana University. Under Chancellor Bance's leadership, IUPUI has been recognized as a major research urban university with global impact. And in fact, you'll see our tagline everywhere, where impact is made. He's actively involved nationally on issues important to higher education. He serves as the Vice Chair of the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities. He's the Chair of the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities Commission on Urban Initiatives. He's a member of the NCAA Division I Board of Directors and the NCAA Executive Committee. He's also a member of the American Council on Education's Commission on International Initiatives. Charles is a thoughtful scholar who's a strong advocate for the power and the possibility of higher education, a gift that we'll hear more about tonight, as well as the exploration of self and the world through the liberal arts. Indeed, Charles is a supporter of the Center on Philanthropy and Philanthropic Studies, both as an institute, but also conceptually, and supports through the Center and SPIA and Service Learning, the commitment to service learning and civic engagement. We appreciate his leadership in these areas and his support and encouragement of the Center on Philanthropy. It's especially appropriate to have Chancellor Bance here tonight for a special remembrance of Karen Lake Petrie. Karen's vision and generosity created the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving in honor of her father. She had been a member of the Board of Visitors at the Center on Philanthropy, as well as the Lake Institute Advisory Board. Karen was a respected advisor and a dear friend. She had a quiet but stubborn strength that was insightful and graceful. She is and will be greatly missed. Charles.
On this occasion, every year, I usually spend some time reflecting on this lecture series, on those who've spoken and on the topics, and how, frankly, it resonates each year from one year to the next. I've described to some people that this is the intellectual activity I look forward to the most every single year. Tonight, however, I'd like to reflect, as Patrick just said to you, on the donor and Karen's commitment to this center. And I want to credit Sylvia Payne, who works in my office, who is a fine graduate of comparative literature, for drawing together a literary analogy that I would not have remembered, even though I'm an undergraduate English major, I did not remember Middlemarch, the novel by George Eliot, nor its leading character in that novel, Dorothea Brooke. And as always with my colleague Sylvia, it is a brilliant parallel. And so let me read a few words that tie these together. In fact, Karen was rather like the hero of George Eliot's novel. Middlemarch is concerned, like all of Eliot's novels, with the moral choices people make in taking responsibility for the conduct of their own lives. Its protagonist is, as I said to you, Dorothea Brooke, a young, idealistic woman growing up in a small town in rural England. She's possessed of an impulse to be of service in some way. Throughout the novel, she struggles against the restrictions of gender, Victorian conventions, and her position in society to find some constructive way to be of use. And eventually her determination pays off, and she finds ways to act on her urge to be useful and to find her own moral compass as a woman of wealth. Among other things, Dorothea then designs the construction of decent housing for the village poor. She works with great tenacity with a landowner to implement those ideas. She later even provides funding to support medical research for a brilliant but debt-ridden young doctor. In the final passage in Middlemarch, the author offers her judgment on her heroine's character and conduct, and in so doing pays tribute to others like the heroine. Her finely touched spirit, her full nature, spent itself in channels which had no great name on the earth. But the effect of her being on those around her was incalculably diffusive. For the growing good of the world is partially dependent on unhistoric acts, and half owing to the number that live faithfully in a hidden life. Like Dorothea Brooke, Karen Lake Buttrey carried out unhistoric acts faithfully and in giving her of herself and of her resources. She frankly shied away from the spotlight, but the memory I always have when her name comes up is those sparkling eyes that she had. They seemed truly lit from behind, and no doubt, I think, with the acts of kindness and generosity for which she expected no recognition. And in so doing, as you heard, she followed the path of her father and mother, Marjorie and Tom Lake, who were guided by faith and generous in the giving of their own time and talents. And so she really did carry on her parents' tradition of family service. And like Dorothea in the novel, I think she asked herself, what do we live for if not to make life less difficult for each other? Karen was, of course, particularly devoted to the Second Presbyterian Church, where she served as a deacon and elder, and throughout her life she gave her time and support to many nonprofit agencies that we all know. And she did have a broader vision of the role of service and a meaningful role of that service in our society. And she envisioned a place where in the academy we would be able to consider the convergence of values and faith and philanthropy. It was a vision uncharacteristic for us in a public university. Some of you have heard me say that when I first heard this, I had that moment of pause which says, can we do this at a public university? And of course the answer is yes, and the outcome of that is exemplified by us here tonight. So that the Institute for Faith and Giving was truly a commemoration from Don and Karen of her parents and her father. And at the founding of the Institute, Bob Payton, who was then the director, said no activity within the university tries to cope with such a broad sweep of action and thought. have no doubt tonight that once again in this lecture, this time from Richard Gunderman, we will see an example of that sweep of action and thought. And so, as Eliot expressed the belief in Middlemarch that true leadership consists of not following the path wherever it leads, but of going where there is no path and carving out new trails, I think we celebrate the leadership of Karen Lake Buttry in leading us to this path of studying faith and giving. It has literally transformed, I believe, the thinking about faith, giving, and philanthropy here at this campus and in the world. And it is for that reason that I am very pleased tonight to present to her husband, Don Buttry, the IUPUI Chancellor's Medallion in celebration of her contribution to not only this campus, not only to the Institute, but to our entire worldwide community who are interested in the question and the values and issues of faith and giving. So please join me in recognizing Don and celebrating.
Karen were here tonight, I have no doubt she would decline being so honored in so public a way. But she isn't here, and I'm pleased to accept on her behalf. Because the Lake Institute, which now memorializes not only her parents, but Karen herself, is now a legacy of her giving and her person, as well as her parents. I'm sure that Tom and Marjorie and Karen are all looking down, smiling tonight.
Thank you, Don. As you can guess, this has been a difficult and challenging time for those of us at the Lake Institute. You need not hear more words except to underscore that Karen was both our visionary and our benefactor. She served on our board, but she knew how to steer well from the back seat. She never put her hand on the steering wheel, but she guided us in ways that will live with us forever. And truly, the Lake Institute is now a legacy with which we are blessed because of Karen as well as her parents and her husband, Don. I also want to express my gratitude to Dr. Jean Temple, the IU Foundation. Jean, you were very, very helpful in all these conversations as to how we might appropriately honor Karen, and you had a very personal relationship with her. In fact, if I may quote you, at one point you said that Karen said of all the gifts she gave, it was that gift that created the Lake Institute that brought her the most joy and the greatest sense of personal satisfaction. So indeed, we are grateful and we journey ahead because of the shining light that has been with us in the past. I'm Bill Enright, Director of the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving, and tonight it's my joy to introduce to you our lecturer, Dr. Richard Gunderman, who will deliver the 8th Annual Thomas H. Lake Lecture on Faith and Giving. Dr. Gunderman is Professor of Radiology, Pediatrics, Medical Education, Philosophy, Liberal Arts, and Philanthropy at Indiana University.